Rabbi Marc Schneier is well known in the base of coexistence. And it's something that you have been involved in for many, many years. Let's talk about New York, where coexistence doesn't seem like it's something that's feeling very fresh and very there.
Go to hell! You go to hell! Go to hell!
What's happening?
We have a challenge. We elected a new mayor who is clearly anti-Israel in terms of his ideology, his rhetoric, his diatribe. He called me 10 days ago on his way to visit President Trump. He called me to condemn what had taken place outside my father's synagogue in New York, a protest, pro-Palestinian protest that had gone out of hand. And I said to him, well, I think your condemnation was somewhat half-baked. The fact that you added to your condemnation a caveat that the synagogue had misused its sacred space in terms of hosting the Nefesh B'Nefesh Aliyah organization. But the point I drilled home to Mamdani is that not only are you out of touch with the Jewish community, you're out of touch with the greater Muslim world. You look at the greater Arab Muslim majority world today, they all favor, by and large, the two-state solution. They may champion a Palestinian state, but never at the expense of a Jewish one. And here you, Mr. Mamdani, you refuse to acknowledge Israel's right to exist.
What was his
as
response?
A Jewish state. I don't think anyone had ever challenged him from an Islamic perspective, which I could probably uniquely do because of who I am in that part of the world. But he needs to understand that this train has left the station without him. I mentioned the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Republic of Indonesia, Azerbaijan, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Kazakhstan, others, all have embraced the formula of a two-state solution. And furthermore, I reminded Mr. Mamdani that the demonization of Israel and the use of such anti-Semitic tropes as apartheid, genocide, occupation will only lead to physical attacks on Jews in New York. So it's somewhat ironic that to temper a newly elected mayor of the second largest Jewish population in the world, that I have to cite other Arab and Muslim leaders as an example for him to follow.
What was his response?
I even said to him, I'm leaving for Azerbaijan on Sunday, why don't you come with me? Love for you to meet with the leadership of Azerbaijan, who I'm close with, from President Aliyev down. And why don't you hear from them what they have to say about Israel? And if you can't do that, I'd be happy to take you on an ambassadorial tour in New York to some of these Arab and Muslim states. So what was his response? Rabbi, you have my cell number. Let's continue the conversation. But it's very, very troublesome. And it's very, very upsetting. But as I told Andrew Cuomo, who's a very, very, very dear friend of mine, the morning of the election result, that he lost, I said, Andrew, Moses could have run for mayor and he would have lost. The bottom line is that you can't overcome the changing demographics of New York City. The New York City The New York Jewish community is not what it used to be in terms of population, in terms of having that voting leverage that we used to have. The city has changed. And that's a reality that we have to face, and why we're going to have to be very creative in reaching out to other ethnicities and other faith communities in terms of finding, identifying either elected officials or candidates that really understand this sensitivity of the Jewish community.
I think I want to talk about the fear factor, because you can't deny it that there are many Jews that are now afraid. There are those that will hide any kind of Jewish symbols. There are places where the mezuzah that is adorned to doors has been vandalized, and also in Canada. This has really gone to a scope that no one would believe would exist today. You're reading a book in the 1930s. Where would you place, if you were a betting man, where would you place the point of entry for the Jewish community with a man like Mamdani? Because
let me make something perfectly clear. This is not the 1930s. 2025 is not 1938. It's not the eve of Kristallnacht, for one reason. And one reason only, because of the state of Israel. It's the state of Israel that has restored the honor and the dignity of the Jewish people. That's why you cannot compare this time to any other time in the last 2,000 years. I mean, the last 2,000 years has been the story of the exile, crusades, inquisitions, pogroms, the Holocaust. But at the same time, there's never been a greater time to be alive as a Jew more than today. Yes, we hear of instances of people removing their kippot or covering up a mezuzah, but it is not really endemic as to where the Jewish community of New York or America is today. I think it's very dangerous for others to suggest that we are seeing the 1930s again, because it's not. At the same time, I feel a great responsibility as an American Jewish leader never to allow the bifurcation of Israel and Judaism, breaking out anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism. To me, it's clear. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I have delivered that message throughout the Arab and the Muslim world. Never thought I'd have to deliver that message to the mayor of the city of New York, but if I have to, so be it.
what's next? I mean, you got a response that didn't give you an answer. There were other rabbis that met, and leaders of the Jewish community that have met with the mayor-to-be, Mamdani. Where do you go from here?
You need to acknowledge a reality that we have a mayor who is a product of his father's anti-Israel ideology, and we're going to have to deal with it. You know, I can't project, I'm not a prophet. I do believe there will be Jews that will leave New York. I don't believe it will be a mass exodus. Look, the morning of the election, it was in the New York Times, I announced I'm building a day school in the Hamptons, in anticipation of the hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish families that I believe will be moving out to the Hamptons and to Suffolk County. At the same time, our new controller is Jewish. It looks like the head of the city council, Julie Menon, has the votes, is the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. So let's see what happens. We have to be vigilant. But I come from a very unique perspective, and I know Mamdani heard me. I mean, he had never been challenged on the Israel issue from an Islamic perspective, which I thought was a very productive conversation in terms of scoring points.
I want to switch gears a minute to what's happening in terms of the conservative right and the danger of the wokeism that is dominant today, and it has reshaped the way a lot of Christians are looking at Israel and the Jewish people. What do you say to them?
Whether it's wokeism, whether it's the Christian right, whether it's Mamdani's anti-Semitism is a cancer that we've dealt with throughout our history. I feel very strongly that anti-Semitism is rooted in jealousy. I think our success as a people is so out of proportion in terms of where we should be. I think the extraordinary success of the state of Israel is so out of proportion. I mean, you look at every major survey, top 10, economics, military, happiness, science, medicine. I mean, Israel's competing with the major superpowers of the world. People are jealous. But you know what? I'd rather people be jealous, which means that I'm successful, that I matter. And again, I cannot compare this to any other period because there's been no other period when we had the state of Israel. We've had in the diaspora some very prosperous, out of proportion, successful Jewish communities without a state of Israel. And the end result was not very pretty. It's a different time. I mean, what Israel achieved in winning a war on 7 fronts in the last 2 years is just so extraordinary. It's just simply remarkable. I mean, no wonder the world is jealous. That's human nature. Whether it's as a nation, whether in your profession, your personal life, very few people are well-wishers. People are jealous. But that's usually the flip side to being successful and to being in a position where you matter. I'd rather be successful. I'd rather matter and let people be jealous.
Can I throw in an Azerbaijan question here?
Please throw in whatever you want, Phyllis.
You're just back from Azerbaijan, and everyone's counting the countries that are joining the Abraham Accords. Azerbaijan is an interesting study because there's been relationships with the Jewish community there. If you needed to explain to those that don't understand the state of Israel and this rapprochement, if you will, in terms of Arab nations with the Jewish state, what would you say? How would you describe that dynamic?
Well, Azerbaijan is unique. I believe of the 57 Muslim nations in the world, it's Israel's greatest ally, friend, and supporter. Azerbaijan checks off all the boxes. Number one, in terms of its support of Israel. Number two, its reverence for its indigenous Jewish community, which is close to 30,000 members today. And Azerbaijan, under President Aliyev's leadership, has become the great beacon of interreligious, intercultural dialogue, cooperation, and coexistence in the greater Muslim world. For Azerbaijan, and I've spoken with President Aliyev about this, for Azerbaijan to join the Abraham Accords is somewhat insulting, but even somewhat comical. Azerbaijan, if it were to join, there should be an asterisk, because it's enjoyed full diplomatic relations with Israel for over 30 years. It's one of Israel's great trade partners. 30% of Israel's oil comes from Azerbaijan. It's different than the UAE or Bahrain or Morocco. Now, Kazakhstan joined the Abraham Accords. I know that the president very much wanted Kazakhstan and needed to demonstrate some expansion of the Abraham Accords, which you could easily do with countries like Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. I mean, the two grand prizes here are Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's largest Muslim majority country, 225 million Muslims, more than the entire Muslim population in the Middle East. President of Indonesia most recently agreed to offer up 20,000 troops to join that international force to monitor Gaza. Indonesia has spoken of the need to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, as it favors a Palestinian one. Saudi Arabia, what people don't understand, it's only the great political prize, it's a great spiritual prize. Saudi Arabia is the spiritual center of Islam. It is the custodian of the two great mosques of Mecca and Medina. So if the spiritual center of Islam was to normalize relations with the spiritual center of Judaism, how that would resonate and reverberate throughout the greater Muslim world, so that the Saudi Arabia normalization goes way beyond politics. It would send such a powerful, profound, political and theological message to Muslims around the world. But again, they're not going to normalize until the issue of the Palestinian state is addressed, or minimally that the Prime Minister acknowledges the aspirations of the Palestinian people for a state. And that's true of Saudi Arabia, that's true of Indonesia, that's true of Qatar and other countries. There will be a need for the Prime Minister to publicly make that acknowledgement.
It's interesting, of course, that it always comes back to this, and it does. This has been going on a long time, and it's not as if Israel or Prime Minister Netanyahu at times has stated that he has sought and lent a hand and sought a two-state solution, each side claiming the other doesn't want it. It kind of brings you back full circle to a standstill, and that is where we are. What's going to break it? People are sitting, looking at what's happening in Gaza. Hamas is rising up in some form. There's no stabilized situation there. There are those in the Arab world that do not want to come in and be part of a military force. How do you get from where things are now to the grand plan of where President Trump is aiming for?
Well, the president's been consistent. Hamas not only will have to disarm, Hamas will have to disappear. And he's been consistent, unequivocal in his insistence, and I'm sure that he will maintain that insistence. We may have to be a little patient here, but I think that is the next step in this process. I also very much support the president's vision all the way back to 2018, what he and Jared Kushner had introduced or had presented as peace through prosperity. I have to support that way of thinking, that it is imperative that the Palestinian people have a taste of economic opportunity, advancement, hope. Without it, I don't see how one could ever achieve a genuine, authentic peace in this region. I participate in that Peace to Prosperity Conference in Manama, Bahrain, 2018. Uniquely, I was a member of the Bahrainian delegation, not the American one. So I think that there are a number of principles and guidelines in place, but we need to play this thing out.
Complex situation, Rabbi.
Life is complex, but again, we can either choose to exaggerate our troubles, or we can magnify our blessings.
Take a moment, excuse me, to
Yeah.
ask you, it's always been at the top. And business to business is important, and a lot of people are making some good money off of what's happening when it comes to the Abraham Accords. It still isn't trickling down. You look at Jordan, and you look at Egypt, and the cold peace, and you look at the finger pointing, and you see those dynamics aren't any different with the Bahrainis, and a little bit better maybe with the UAE. It's a larger nation. How does that change?
My dear, I respectfully disagree. I think that again, I'm making the
Look
point.
at the flights coming into Israel and
I'm not talking about the flights, okay?
You're talking.
Again,
You're in business.
No. What I'm saying, that we can either choose to exaggerate our troubles or magnify our blessings. And this last war that Israel fought was the first time in its 77-year history where you had countries like Saudi Arabia and Jordan working with the Israelis and the Brits and the American and the French to intercept missiles from Iran. You had Muslim-majority countries like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan take a very public stand in support of Israel during this war. And the same for Morocco.
Granted.
And other countries.
Right.
So again, it is a process. Let me remind you, it took the Israelites 40 years to get to the Promised Land. I am not suggesting that we have arrived at the Promised Land of Muslim-Jewish relations. But the good news is the journey has begun. And I am buoyantly optimistic. When I come back from a Muslim-majority country like Azerbaijan, Shiite, 96% Muslim, that champions its relationship with the state of Israel. And I see more and more Muslim Arab countries moving in this direction. I will choose to magnify our blessings and not to exaggerate our troubles.
So there's no exaggeration in people to people. There are small efforts constantly on peace initiatives and people to people initiatives. But if you look at the newspapers of these countries, and if you look at the dynamics in terms of, and I have to bring that up in terms of airplanes filled with people coming from these countries to Israel, to a Jewish state, it doesn't exist. Is there a way to actually go back to these countries and change that mindset?
I think the fact that the first step in this process is that the leadership is in a very positive place. That in and of itself is a major achievement. It's a major accomplishment. It's a first step. Because you want to cite for me all these media outlets, throughout the greater Muslim world. I can cite for you all the great media outlets in the United States of America that have taken on an anti-Israel stance. And I'm not denying the fact that we have seen a growth in anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric and diatribe. Nevertheless, I will come back to this refrain that I've shared with you, and that I share with my congregation, that I share with audiences around the world. There has never been a time, a greater time, a better time to be a Jew than today because of the state of Israel. And you are correct that it has not trickled down. It has not necessarily disseminated among the masses. But 10 years ago, we didn't even have these kinds of support groups among the leaders either. It is a process. It is a slow and steady process, but slow and steady every time wins the race. And I am very optimistic that we're going to win that race in terms of securing the welfare and continued growth of the state of Israel.
There were numerous people, young Jews particularly, that voted for Mamdani. When it comes to education about Israel and the state, it seems to be that there is lacking context, lack of understanding of why Israel was created, understanding the Israel today and its principles. Why were so many
One of the greatest challenges facing the American Jewish community is the growing distance between the people of the book and the books of our people. Ignorance leads to indifference, indifference leads to a loss of identity. At the same time, the war, the past 2 years, in a very ironic way, helped strengthen Jewish identity. So with my own community, how many young people came out the woodworks now identifying as Jews. That's a challenge. The freedom to live Judaism, as we have in America, also implies the freedom to leave Judaism. That's a challenge we have. But thank God the world, and with its continued growth in anti-Semitism, the anti-Semites of the world will not allow us to forget that we are Jews. So, in a somewhat twisted way, listen, there is a school of thought that what has kept the Jewish people alive has been anti-Semitism. So you have all these forces coming together, but again, never been a better time to be alive as a Jew than today.
Well, Rabbi Schneier, a lot to mull over, and appreciate your candor.
Pleasure.
And a lot more to look forward to.
Thank you, Felice.